Some decisions made with respect to study budgeting and development end up having a big impact on the ethics processes as well. Okay? So when it comes to human ethics considerations, I think most people in the room will have a lot of familiarity with institutional review boards, behavioral ethics boards, research ethics boards, whatever their name goes by in your particular jurisdiction. These are a prominent feature of work within the health sciences, and there's a number of types of information, or there's a number of features of the current, the sort of data collection that need to be considered. And ethics review boards are often particularly sensitive about certain types of data that might be collected. One of them is names of devices. So with Bluetooth, let's go make this interactive. If you go, I would invite you to go to the site here. So if you go to the Ethica site, and if you go to, for our study here, the downloads for raw data. So here's Ethica, and you'll notice that under sensor data here, there's a raw data download. Do you see that? Okay. I'd like you to go to the raw data download, and I'd like you to go see if you can download data from Bluetooth, okay? And you can pick the participant. I would suggest picking a participant who has more data collected. Maybe 1807 would be a good one, okay? And I'd ask that you, for that participant, you download the data in a CSV file, which will allow you to essentially see it in a spreadsheet. Okay. So I think I suggested 1807, which is a participant with something over 90% of the time their phone has been on. 1807. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so here we go. And I'm sorry, I just needed to do a bit of maintenance there. That's great. Okay. So if you download that, what you will get is a CSV file that can then be opened. And I invite you to open it as well. So I'll go do the same here. And here we go, sensor data, raw data download. Okay. And you'll notice when you request this that it ends up, so this is Bluetooth data. Did I say Bluetooth? No. I said GPS? Or Bluetooth? Okay, good. I meant to do Bluetooth, yeah. And I'm going to download 1807 here. When I do this, it will provide me with a link, which I can then click, and it will download it to my device. So here I am, and it says 351 records. I'm going to download it. It's downloading currently. And then I need, in order to process this, I need to go and unzip it, sort of get it out of its current form. So I'm going to go to my downloads. Here it is. And I'm going to say that I want to, okay, sorry, that's not it. Sorry? There it is. Today, yeah. And extract here. Okay. So this 237GK is here. And I could go open it up here. And what you'll see is this, so this is for our study, right? And you'll notice that this is reporting for this particular user contacts with Bluetooth devices. And you'll notice that there's a device name here. Do you see that? And these names often, by default, they often just leave them as the name of the type of item. But in some cases, it is possible to change this to be identifying. So it might say Dave's phone, or Mary's iPad, or something like that. And some ethics review boards have concerns about this information.
It's got my laptop number on it.
It has your laptop here?
That's my laptop. So whoever it is had contact with my laptop, I guess.
Okay, yeah. And there's an Apple Pencil. Oh, okay. Nice. Okay. Yes.
LG Stylo is big.
Oh, is that right? This LG Stylo? Yeah.
I'm Noel.
So, okay, so that's one example of type of information that people are concerned about. Another type of information has to do with what's visible via geolocation, right? So we saw this from the first day, but if I were to check out participant 231 here and do so from Sunday till now, for example, and go take a look, there's a contact pattern writ large. And for some ethics review boards, this, you need to argue for benefits of including this data in your study, because they'll be concerned that it, by its nature, it's precise enough that potentially you could identify someone based on where their home is, where they spend most of their time. You might be able to zero in. It's not been a showstopper. We've had tons of studies. We have dozens of studies which have included this data. It's just, it is a point of recurrent discussion. Do you need geographic data for your analysis? And if so, why? What value does it offer? What benefit does it bring to the table? And that's what it's about for our ethics review board, is sort of balancing risks and benefit and making a case as to why it's needed. I mentioned before network recruitment, snowball sampling, respondent-driven sampling is requiring blinded referrals, so that if someone wants to refer their friend to us, they can't give the friend's name. They have to give them a piece of information which lets the friend contact us if they so wish, so that we don't have names of people who haven't volunteered them themselves. Rather, we only have names people have come forward themselves to offer them. And there is this notion of that some have expressed concerns with about collectively identifiable information. When you're getting data on contact patterns and Bluetooth, collectively, potentially that could identify a person. It's not one in isolation, it's together. I haven't heard this really advanced strongly by an ethics review board. It's just, it is a potential line of discourse that could come up. Notifiable behavior and law-breaking activities are two types. These might not be quite the right words here, but the point is, if there's a behavior that it poses such great health concerns that we feel a duty to intervene, or if they're engaged in potential law breaking, our records may be subpoenaed for use in court. And we need to at least let participants know that this is possible, that their records could be subpoenaed. So when they go through informed consent process, they can decline if they feel too exposed by that. With notifiable behavior, we want to emphasize that we're not looking at the data at such a level or getting it in such a timely fashion that they can rely on us to be provision of medical help for themselves. Yes, Roberto.
When you are doing these sort of studies across provinces in Canada,
Yeah.
do you have issues about privacy laws across the different provinces, or you don't have that issue? Like in Australia, we have
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
restriction depending on which state.
Which state
you are
you're in? Yeah, it's a good question. We haven't had that for the cases I've been thinking about, but I think with Quebec, that could become an issue. But Mohammed, you're working with, I think, Jan Kestens in Montreal, aren't you?
Yeah,
And there have been special issues that came up privacy-wise, have there?
so there are two things to differentiate here. One is the requirements that they have, like the privacy requirements that an institution have that has to be met. Like, for example, all data has to be encrypted. You only have to use a technology called SSL, which HTTPS. You can see that those to make sure that all the data transmission is secure, and a collection of these requirements that makes basically meets the privacy requirements of that of the region. But then when it comes to ethics, that's usually so basically what I want to say is that our security features meets most of meets all of the teams that we have worked with so far for their jurisdictions. Now, when it comes to ethics board, that's a separate thing. I think the ethics, yes, they do look at the security and security measures as well, but they're mostly concerned about whether the data is identifiable, whether the data can be can have any harm to individuals or not, and so on. So we have never had a problem of an ethics basically asking for any feature that we did not have in terms of the security aspects of the system.
Yeah, I mean, one thing, this names of devices, that came up very early on. I haven't heard much about it later, but fundamentally, that may need to be masked, I can imagine,
and
as a possibility.
we thought that Bluetooth
Yeah.
is actually phasing out, and with beacons,
Right.
that's not a problem.
Yeah.
Because beacons, you don't capture those anyway.
Quite right, quite right. So that's probably a past issue and reflects a general tightening of the rules.
Yes.
Right. The context clinician-patient relationships is one that we're getting into, and in general, transmission of patient medical information. I think here in Australia, you folks also have the comparable laws going under the name of HIPAA. Is that right? Health Information and Patient Privacy Act? No? No? Okay. This is a big feature in North America of when it comes to rules governing the transmission, storage of information related to patients. And things have to be HIPAA certified for certain uses. And it's not so much a technical matter as it is a regulatory approval matter, as I understand it. Thanks. I've talked with Mohammed a bit about this. Thanks a ton, Jeff. But Jeff, do you happen to know, in the health informatics field, HIPAA is a set of rules in the North American context involving health information privacy for patients. Is there a corresponding set and sort of isomorphic set in Canada, or sorry, in Australia?
No, not as such. There's a whole lot of privacy. There have been some sort of Privacy Act interpretations, but it's not as formalised
Okay.
as in the US.
Okay.
The interwebs point me to the Privacy Act 1988.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's a very generic Privacy Act that covers everything, not just
Right.
electronic Australia. There's a whole lot of interpretation, but as far as I know, it's all draft. But mostly it's about the privacy in different systems.
Right.
But it's very much you have to show you comply with the Privacy
Exactly.
Act.
Exactly.
It's a general act.
And particularly in healthcare settings.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Intervention studies are another one where we typically see another review board. So we have a behavioral ethics review board that we deal with for most of our studies, but for intervention studies particularly, we get into the biomedical one where there's it's kind of an interesting thing because biomedical review board is so used to dealing with drug trials and invasive interventions that it may be that they actually have less concern than the behavioral ethics review board. They're less likely to take us to task than the behavioral review board, just because they're used to dealing with enough quite significant types of interventions rather than say something like a lifestyle intervention. But naturally, this comes to the fore if you're dealing with very tricky subjects. Counseling for those with severe depression, etc. I think there's some other challenges here. Links to charts or health records and external databases. This is something we haven't talked about. We'll get into it a little bit this afternoon. But some of the data collected by Ethica may be combined with other data on the device with external data. An example would be it's combined with data from a wearable or from a Bluetooth scale. So when I go weigh myself, it records it. When I'm using a Empatica smartwatch, it's recording data. But there's another type of study that's very important, or another type of way in which data sources can come together. And that is, once data is recorded here and transmitted over to the Ethica servers, once you can browse it on that interface, in principle, it's very possible. Very common need for the sort of work we do to draw in from other data sources. These data sources might include things like weather databases, GIS databases related to air quality in different geographic regions. We might draw in this data and link it in with the data collected on the phone. And that can be done after the fact for analysis. Now, there's a set of systems we use to do that. One of the ones we use most extensively, two of them we use extensively are R, the R package, which some of you may be familiar with, and a system called Spark, which is used for very large-scale data analysis. Amina would know about that. And Spark is just great for doing analysis of data with Ethica. And if anyone is interested, we have lots of scripts that run with Ethica data and combine data sources from different sensors, from surveys with sensor data, et cetera, in a very performant way. But the point is, often when we're doing that analysis, we'll draw in data from external data sources, like these weather databases or what have you. And one of the challenges when you're doing that comes in when you're bringing in health record data. And typically what we do there is we might do a chart review as part of this study. We obtain some data and then we add it as a database in a database system. So we might do something like MySQL or Postgres or some sort of database, or even a NoSQL database. I recognize not everyone here will be familiar with those terms, but the idea is we add in data from health records and link it to the data from Ethica based on a common scrambled identifier. De-identified, we don't know who it is, but we need that to make that identifiable link at first before we throw that data away. So once we make the link, we don't need to know who's who then. And there's some extra sensitivities there from an ethics review standpoint if we're tapping into their health data. Similarly, administrative data. Data from a large-scale administrative single-payer healthcare system data sources. Huge potential for linking this sort of data to people's care-seeking behavior, diagnoses, outcomes, pharmaceutical prescriptions, etc. But there's extra sensitivities there because it does require some identifiable link at first before some master list before you get rid of it. So some tips here. Engage early and engage often with your IRB and research ethics board and develop a relationship. Key, point the IRB and the IRB, I'll just call it IRB here. What do you call it in Australia? Is it a research ethics board or IRB?
HREC.
HREC?
Human Research Ethics.
Okay, a committee.
HREC.
HREC. Okay. Thanks. Computer science and health, two areas where I've chosen to spend all my efforts, I think are the peaks in terms of acronym density. Although the military, I think, is pretty bad too. But I'll just try to remember HRECs. So you can point HRECs to precedent in terms of past studies. Now, frankly, this is an area, as we'll talk about later today, where having a system like Ethica, which has been used in dozens of previous studies of approved ethics board approved studies, becomes an asset. You don't have to argue from whole cloth. Our system is secure. Our system has appropriate levels of security. You can point to many other published studies or records of past work as precedent for good ethically conducted work using a system. I would also note that some of my colleagues have also pointed to end user license agreements as demonstration of just how widespread this sort of data collection is outside of the research setting. End user license agreements are the horrible pieces of almost inscrutable language that are given to you when you say, do you want Apple to be able to share your data to improve service quality or something? You have to sign this end user license agreement, and you have to scroll down and say okay, or I agree. But it's often in there is provision of that they can use your data for different purposes. Here I think the key thing is to be able to argue for past use of this system. Now, this background, this is one of the most important points here, so I want to hit it. Want to hit it early. We have created for use by folks like you reference documents that can be provided to an HREC to provide background on this sort of data collection and provide information on the specific system. So if you wanted to conduct a study with Ethica, rather than having to describe in exhaustive detail the Ethica system, you could give them these two documents, this background document and smartphone-based data collection in general. It's kind of a primer. And then background on Ethica. How does the system work? What does it consist of? So that when you describe for your study what you're going to do, you just have to be specific about the specific features there. You don't have to describe Ethica. You don't have to describe how that system works in general, how it stores data, where it's encrypted, all that sort of stuff. Those things are provided for you. And I've provided those as part of the package for this. You'll go into the documents that we provided and you'll find them in there. And I'd suggest that you take a look at them because past evidence has been that ethics review boards have found those very helpful. Sort of clues them into, what is this system in general and how does this work fit into health research more generally.
So we can use any of the documents that you've got in there? Was there a caveat you had on that on the first day?
Sorry?
Was there a caveat you had on that on the first day?
The caveat I had on the first day was please don't circulate, other than this group, please don't circulate the example ethics applications that we provide outside of this group. You can adopt them,
Yeah.
You can adapt them. It's just I'd prefer you also don't pass them around so that my colleagues who are co-leads on them start getting emails, about, please tell me why, you did it this way. If you want to ask questions, ask me.
What about potential funders? Are you happy for us to share it with them?
Those example ethics applications? Yes, if you're very confident that they won't be passed around from there. Yeah. So if they're okay with looking at them, often with grant review, there's you agree as a reviewer that you will not share the information that has been provided to you as part of grant review with others. And as long as it's governed by things like that, I'm fine with it. Sure. So, yeah, I know. And, if you have special needs, ask me about it. The point is, I'd like it that people don't have to go and reinvent the whole wheel with these things, because we've done this many times, and hopefully it's not a big issue. You want to warn in your consent form in a mature way about risks, including legal obligations of individuals with respect to subpoenas. I think that HRECs, if they have the opportunity to talk with other HRECs that have a history of handling these things, it is favorable. And I know Andrew went through this recently, but I'm not sure in the end if Beryl was able to sort of comment at all or talk with anyone in your HREC.
It was good to be able to refer to her and have her as a contact. I was going to say as well, we have an Australian example using the forms here as well, which we have to people want to have a look at that as well. Of course, it's on the NEAF form, the never-ending application form, which has been superseded now by the new form. So, but by and large, in terms of words around those standard questions that the NHMRC always ask, we've got some responses for that as well, which perhaps be adapted or at least give you a sense of how it can respond.
Which ethics committee was that?
This was our university ethics
So
committee.
Western Sydney
That's
University.
right, and we're about to strap ourselves in to try and for a local health district ethics committee as well, and so on. So the idea was to try and set a few precedents first, using some of the Canadian examples of the Bellway and then this student cohort study as well, to be able to sort of set some precedents, to be able to hopefully allay the fears that often unfounded fears really that these communities can have.
Which LHD ethics committee are you going for?
Sorry?
Which LHD ethics committee?
It's going to be Western Sydney LHC, I think.
Okay, so based at Westmead is the big.
That's the one. Yeah. This is why we went to ethics committee. We went and did it somewhere else first to try it because we know it there.
Well, they've got the scientific committee as well, which complicates it a bit. So.
Yeah.
That's not full-time. I mean, the other thing to say as well was it was really useful having, and you guys know this anyway, but having an ongoing conversation and discussion with the ethics committee as you're putting it together was very helpful as well. We could say, well, we're going to use this, what would be the expected response that the ethics committee might have, and that's how we need to think about this, and this, and so we can go on. So rather than sort of freaking them out with the big applications they've been seeing before, they were quite helpful in guiding us around what might be said and what sort of issues they were going to be interested in.
Yeah, when we first started engaging, so thanks a lot, Andrew. That's actually really helpful in this context. When we first started doing this work, I think we first engaged with our research ethics board in 2008 about this, and this was 6 months or so before we actually began the work in earnest on the first versions of our system, with Mohammed taking the lead there. And we went and we had meetings with the Biomedical Ethics Review Board as well as with the Behavioral. we pointed them to other systems which at the time, operated in similar areas, and a bit of published work that they could look to. And that was really helpful for them to know this wasn't a singular monadic thing, that we just wanted to do something, of extraordinary bizarrity. They were bizarreness. They became a lot more comfortable once they know that there were others working in this space, and that there was precedent. And it has been an ongoing relationship of trust that's been built up. And frankly, after the first study or two or three, they just got a lot more comfortable with it, particularly starting small. And that builds up your confidence, the ethics board's confidence. It helps you go to a much more savvy study, but it also can allow their concerns to be lower when it does come to a more sophisticated study. So we reuse earlier documentation quite a bit from earlier applications. We have erred on the side of sort of complying with their concerns rather than fighting them. We've gotten really considerably, very little feedback actually. We've made use of some what I call tiered opt-in strategies for some of our studies. Basically, we allow people to say how their data is to be used. So some of them, for example, may say they're comfortable with their data only being used at the level of an aggregated totals. Others say that they're willing to let it be used at an individual level as long as their consent is received, like for a figure. If we show a sort of a plot of people's activity level over time, or pedometry based on contact patterns for this particular person. In some studies, we go back to them and we say, is this okay that we use this data in this way? That does require a master list to be retained for longer, so it has its trade-off, this ability to contact them. But the whole idea is there of giving extra say to the participant in how their data is to be used, and that may lessen concerns about confidentiality on their part, or about that their privacy is being respected. So some points for discussion: precedence with other studies, capacity to opt out, public nature of much visible information. This held a lot of water in some of our early work. I remember early discussions that we're recording, where people are and, what resources are nearby them. But it was noted that much of the information that we were recording was about students circulating on campus, for example. And that could be observed by people on campus. I mean, it's circulation in a public space. Just as public speech, speaking in a public forum has different levels of concerns about recording it than speaking in your home. So it is with much of the information being about circulation in a public sphere. And our ethics review board listened to that a lot. I mean, the other sad fact is, there's tremendous commercial exploitation of this sort of information with almost no meaningful consent by people. And so the point is, we are going through the hard work to do it right. Others are doing this at a very large scale without that process. By implication, we'd like some accommodation, the fact that this information could be used for good as well as to, push goods. We have gotten some goodwill by our ethics review board in recognition of the fact that this information is out there. And if we're going through a meaningful, respectful way of asking people that balances risks and benefits, they generally tend to turn a fairly favorable eye on this. The other thing I would say now that this really needs to be reflected here is not only is there precedent with other studies, it's the Ethica system has gone through this so many times that it itself is a more trusted system that a lot of researchers have worked very successfully in this context in an ethical way. So we had talked about opt-out, participant opt-out. Participants can actually exercise control at a quite detailed level over a system. They can opt out from a particular data source. They can decline to enable their Bluetooth, enable their GPS. They can pause data collection with that snooze button. They can drop out of a study. They have this option of deleting data after the study for many studies, retroactively delete it. And not only that, but with the surveys, they can quit the surveys. And they can elect not to answer certain questions for many surveys. Mohammed, with these surveys, you can mark a question as mandatory. And if a person declines to answer a mandatory question and persists, they don't want to answer that, is that tantamount to canceling the survey? So basically, that leads to the survey being viewed as non-responsive, non-acceptable for data collection, and essentially it's viewed as canceled then. Is that right? Yeah. But otherwise, the questions are optional. In any case, a person doesn't have to answer them. They don't.
If it's mandatory and you don't answer it, then you have to quit the survey to get out of it. Is that right? And then with any answers before that are not recorded either?
Correct.
Yes, everything is recorded up to that point,
Oh,
but it's
okay.
marked as cancel. So, for example, you answer the first,
okay.
third, second,
That's
third question.
interesting.
The fourth one is mandatory. You don't want to answer it. You press cancel. A record will be shown there that user responded this to the first one, this to the second one, this to the third one, but canceled it.
So you get some data.
You get everything
Then you
that
have to
was
decide
provided.
whether that's enough.
Yeah.
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 Decide whether that's enough to be a
So you put the hard questions at the end.
Well, mandatory usually are for the questions that are crucial to your to the logic of the survey. Like, for
Yeah.
example, if you ask gender and you, based on whether they're male or female, you want to split and provide different survey questions, you need to know the response to that. So you mark it as mandatory. But everything else pretty much is set as optional.
Yeah. So this is something that's important, though, to communicate to an ethics review board. There's these multiple tiers of opportunity to opt out. Recurrent, repeated, respectful way of sort of allowing people to choose not to engage when they wish to do so. And it's incumbent upon us as researchers to remind them of this at time of consent. That they do have these repeated opportunities to say, today I'm not up to this, with that opt-out button, or to disable their data sources. Now, one strategy that is kind of my pet idea, but we actually have yet to put it into practice. But as we get more and more involved with governmental bodies, this has come to the fore as one of the models one can use is to try to balance between potential participants' desire for privacy on the one hand, and on the other hand, the recognition that there may be times where data is needed. And the idea here is that there may be some situations where you want to collect data that remains, as it were, in escrow. It remains in a embargoed state, a state where no one can access it for analysis except on a contingent basis, where the contingency reflects some sort of urgency or need. Think about it this way. Think about if you were involved in the, maybe it's an LHD, in our area, maybe it's a health region, and you were interested in, you've been hard hit by pertussis outbreaks and measles outbreaks due to falling vaccination rates, and you're interested in responding very quickly if there's a sign of an outbreak coming about, trying to intervene quickly with outbreak response immunization campaigns, with advisories and education campaigns, and potentially with contact tracing measures, etc. It may be that you want to start data collection for participants, and essentially tell them this data will be discarded unless there is an outbreak, okay, or a plausible occurrence of an outbreak. In the event of the outbreak, that data will be used for emergency control, but otherwise it will not be used. So in short, it will be used purely in a contingency where it's really, really needed. In some cases, there could even be a compensatory arrangement provided there. But the idea is to essentially delete that data after a certain period of time unless it's needed. If it is needed, you can act quickly because you have this past month worth of data on contact patterns in this community, which might allow you to perform contact tracing more quickly, allow you to proceed to a better understanding of what's spreading it and a better understanding of who needs to be immunized. So at a large scale data scale, where you have concerns about privacy, contingent mechanisms for relaxing, for collecting data that allow you to look retrospectively may offer some benefits, including for the participants who gave it. But at the same time ensure privacy for the day-to-day circumstance. So that is one model that seems a potential one in the context of this sort of work. Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So that's something that's going to happen quickly.
Quickly, yeah.
How do you have the participants already on hand, or you already
You would
done as data?
Sure. You would have to enroll them with the explicit provision that this data that you are submitting, it's remaining in escrow. And so they're participants in the tool, in Ethica, over time. Their data is being collected. It is being discarded after a certain period of time. And then you would push them, an informational survey.
So you're getting a bank of people that
Exactly.
already
That's correct. You have a cohort of people. You're not accumulating their information in a cumulative fashion. The data is being discarded for all but the past month, say. But then, if there is a situation where there's a foodborne illness outbreak or a vaccination preventable disease outbreak, you could then basically push an advisory out to these individuals to let them know that this emergency has arisen, and you are going to be accessing that data which they have provided in this relationship of trust. That basically it's only going to be used under this emergency term. You could even post them a survey asking if they want to opt out now. This is their choice, but otherwise that data would be used. But it would be actionable immediately because the data is already there. It's the data for the recent time. And then you might ask, are they okay with the data being collected the next few weeks while the emergency is on as well? So you would actually have a record that might allow you to undertake action very quickly, and the requisite analytics and action being undertaken on the basis of this evidence that you wouldn't have otherwise had recourse to. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So those are some comments on human ethics side. I'm going to anything that people want to talk about this. I'm going to go on now to talk a little bit about the